Huainanzi Chapter 13. In ancient times, those who wore plain caps and simple rolled collars ruled the world. 1. Their potency was of life, not death, of giving, not usurping. None in the world rejected their service, all embraced their potency. In those times, yin and yang were harmonious and tranquil, the winds and rains were timely and moderate. The myriad things prospered and flourished, nests of birds and owls could be inspected on bended knee, 2 wild animals could be ensnared and kept compliant. What need was there for official costumes, wide sashes, buckled collars, grand insignia? 13/120/3, 513.2 In ancient times, the people lived in humid lands, hollowing out caves again and again. In the winters, they could not bear the frost, the snow, the fog, the dew. In the summers, they could not bear the oppressive heat, the sultry days, the mosquitoes, the flies. The sages therefore created for them the pounding of earth and the cutting of trees to make houses. Above they placed ridge poles, and below they placed rafters to protect against the winds and rain and to keep out the cold and heat. The common people 3 were put at ease. Wu Xing was the first to make clothing. He spun the hemp, working the warp with his hand, suspending it through his fingers, and forming it like netting. Later generations of sages made looms for doubled weaves to increase their usefulness. The people were thus able to protect their bodies and drive off the cold. In ancient times, the people sharpened sticks to plow, polished clam shells to weed, cut firewood to make fuel, and haul jars to draw water. The people labored, but their gains were few. Later generations of sages made them plows, plowshares, and hoes, axes for cutting firewood, and well sweeps for drawing water. The people were at ease, and their gains multiplied. In ancient times, the great rivers and famed waterways cut across the roads and impeded the comings and goings of the people. Consequently, the sages hollowed logs and squared timbers to make rafts and boats. Therefore, according to a place's circumstances of plenty or dearth, things could be exchanged and transported. They made shoes from hides and traversed 1,000 li, they endured the labor of carrying loads on their backs. The sages thus created for them the bending of wood into wheels and the constructing of carts, the hitching of horses and the yoking of oxen. The people could thus go great distances without tiring. Since ferocious beasts would injure people and there was nothing with which to stop them, the sages created for them the casting of metal and the forging of iron to make weapons and arms. The animals could harm them no more. Thus, pressed by difficulties, the sages searched for what was advantageous, bound by adversity, they created what was necessary. In each case, the people used what they had come to know from the sages to eliminate what harmed them and to seek what benefited them. If the unchanging past cannot be followed, if the martial implements of the past cannot be relied on, then there will be occasions when the laws and standards of the former kings must be adjusted to changing circumstances. 13/120/7, 1713.3 According to the ancient regulations, in the marriage ritual, no reference is made to the host, i.e., the bridegroom. But in the spring and autumn annals there is an instance in which the bridegroom is named. 5. Shun married without announcing it to his father. These actions were not in accord with the rites. 6. One establishes one's eldest son as the heir. But King Wen set aside Wu Xing 07 and used King Wu. This was not in accord with the regulations. According to the rites, one marries at age 30. But King Wen was 15 and had King Wu. This was not in accord with the law. In the time of the Xia, the tablet for the deceased was placed above the eastern steps, the Yin placed it between 2 pillars, the Zhou placed it above the western steps. These rites were not the same. Shan used earthen coffins, the Xia encircled them with stonework, the Yin used double coffins, the Zhou built a partition and arranged feathers on it. These burial practices were not the same. The Xia sacrificed at night, the Yin sacrificed during the day, the Zhou sacrificed when the sun rose at dawn. These sacrifices were not the same. For Yao, the music was the great measure, 8 for Shun, the 9 harmonies, for Yu, the great Xia, for Tang, the great melody, for Zhou, the grand martiality and the 3 elephants. 9 These tunes were not the same. Therefore, the 5 thearchs had different ways, but their potency covered the world. The 3 kings had distinct activities, but their fame has been handed down to later generations. They all instituted rites and music in accord with alterations in the times. It was like the blind music master Kuang setting the bridges on a se, he moved and adjusted them up and down the sounding board without measuring by inches or feet, yet none failed to be tuned to the proper note. Thus, those who comprehend the essential qualities of rites and music are able to create accurate notes. The basis and ruling principle lies within them, therefore they understand how standards and measures should be applied comprehensively. 13/120/19, 27 Duke Zhao of Luten had a nurse whom he loved. When she died, he had a cap of silk made on her behalf. Thus there came to be mourning clothes for nurses. 11 The Lord of Yang killed the Lord of Liu and took his wife. Thus there came to be the protocol of excusing women from great feasts. 12 When the regulations of the former kings were not appropriate, they were discarded. In the actions of the later ages, if they were good, they were promoted. This is why the rites and music have never even begun to have constancy. Therefore, the sages regulate rites and music, they are not regulated by them. Ordering the state has a constant, and benefiting the people is its basis. Correcting education has its norms, and carrying out orders is the apogee. If one investigates benefiting the people, one does not necessarily imitate the ancients. If one investigates activities, one does not necessarily accord with the old. Now, as for the decline of the Xia and Shang, they did not alter their laws, and they were destroyed. As for the ascendancy of the 3 dynasties, they ruled without imitating their predecessors and so suited their circumstances. Thus, sages' laws alter with the times, their rites transform along with customs. Their clothes and utensils were each determined according to their use, the laws, measures, regulations, and commands accorded with what was appropriate. Therefore, altering what is ancient is not something that can be rejected, and following what is customary is not enough to warrant being called excessive. The 100 rivers have different sources, yet all return to the ocean. The 100 lineages of learning have different specializations, yet all strive for good governance. 13/121/1, 813.4 When the way of the kings grew deficient, the Odes was created. When the house of Zhou fell into ruin and their ritual standards were destroyed, the Spring and Autumn Annals was created. Those who study the Odes and the Spring and Autumn Annals view them as beautiful, both are products of ages of decline. The Confucians follow them in order to teach and guide the generations. But how can they compare to the flourishing of the 3 dynasties? Taking the Odes and the Spring and Autumn Annals as the way of the ancients, they honor them. But there is also the time before the Odes and the Spring and Autumn Annals were created. Now, the deficiency of the way is not as good as the entirety of the way. Reciting the poems and texts of the former kings is not as good as hearing and attaining their words. Hearing and attaining their words is not as good as attaining that about which they spoke. As for attaining that about which they spoke, speaking cannot speak it. Therefore, the way that can be spoken is not the enduring way. 1313/121/8, 1313.5 When the Duke of Zhou served King Wen, he never encroached on the regulations. He never acted on his own behalf. It was as if his person was not equal to his regalia, it was as if his speech did not emanate from his mouth. When receiving instructions from King Wen, he was submissive and weak, as if incapable, as if afraid he might stray from them. It can be said that he was able to be a true son. King Wu died, King Chen was young. The Duke of Zhou continued the work of Kings Wen and Wu, he took the position of the Son of Heaven, he oversaw the governance of the world. He pacified the rebellions of the Yi and did tribal peoples, he punished the crimes of Guan and Cai. 14 He turned his back to the north, he brought the lords of the land to court, he meted out punishments, he gave out rewards all without taking counsel. His authority moved heaven and earth, and his voice extended to all within the seas. It can be said that he was able to be martial. When King Cheng attained maturity, the Duke of Zhou gathered together the population registers and resigned from the government. He faced north, offered gifts, and served as a minister. He acted only after being asked and put policies into practice only after the request was repeated without the will to arrogate authority to himself and without a proud countenance. It can be said that he was able to be a minister. Thus the same person altered 3 times in order to accord with the times. How much more so for rulers who frequently change generations. 15 And states that frequently change rulers. People use their positions to attain their wishes and use their authority to obtain their desires. It is clear that if one wants to use rituals that are uniformly implemented and laws that are uniformly established to respond to the times and accord with alteration, he will be incapable of attaining equilibrium. 1613/121/15, 22 Therefore, what the sage follows is called the way, what he does is activities. The way is like metal and stone musical instruments, once tuned, they do not change. Activities are like the qin and se, they need to be retuned continuously. Therefore, law, regulations, ritual, and rightness are instruments for governance, but not the means by which to govern. Thus, humaneness is the warp, rightness is the skein of weft threads. 17 This does not change in 10,000 generations. It is like the fact that one can test the abilities of the people and study the ways they can be used, even though daily there are alterations. Does the world have unchanging laws? If you fit with affairs of the age, obtain the patterns of man, accord with heaven and earth, and bring happiness to the ghosts and spirits, then you can rectify and govern. 13/121/24, 27 13.6 In antiquity, the people were pure, the artisans skillful, the merchants straightforward, the women simple. This is why governance and education were easily transformed in response to circumstances, and habits and customs were easily adjusted to suit changing times. In the present age, moral potency is declining more and more, and the customs of the people are becoming more and more stingy. Wanting to use straightforward and simple laws to put in order a people already corrupted is like wanting to control a horse without a bit and a whip. In ancient times, the divine farmer used no regulations or commands, yet the people followed. Tang i.e., Yao and Yu i.e., Shun had regulations and commands but no punishments. The Xia used no false words, the Shang made oaths, the Zhou made covenants. When one comes down to the present time, people accept shame and think lightly of being disgraced, value taking and belittle giving. Wanting to use the way of the divine farmer to put things in order would only make chaos inevitable. When Bachan Zijao 18 resigned from being a lord of the land and simply tilled the fields, the world exalted him. Now, those who resign from office and become hermits occupy the bottom rung of their locales. How can this be considered the same? The armies of antiquity had bows and swords, their lances had no sharp points, their halberds, no tips. The armies of the later ages have siege weapons and battering rams with which to attack, spiked balls with which to defend, arrays of crossbows with which to shoot, and iron chariots with which to fight. When states fought in ancient times, they did not kill the young, and they did not capture the old. What in antiquity was proper is today laughable, what was taken to be honorable in antiquity is taken to be disgraceful today, what was taken to be order in antiquity is taken to be chaos today. 13/122/1, 9 Now, the divine farmer and Fuxi did not give out rewards and punishments, yet the people did no wrong, but those who govern today are unable to dispense with laws and rule the people. Shun grasped a shield and axe and brought the Miao rulers to submission, yet those who lead campaigns today are unable to use arms to reduce the violence. Looking at the issue from this perspective, it is clear that laws and standards are the means to assess the customs of the people and regulate relaxation and work. Instruments and implements accord with the alterations of the times and are regulated to fit what is suitable. Now, the sages created laws and the myriad people were regulated by them, the worthies established rituals and the ignorant were restrained by them. But people who are regulated by laws cannot propose far-reaching initiatives, those who are restrained by rituals cannot effect responsive alterations. An ear that does not know the difference between high and low tones cannot order tunes and notes. A mind that does not understand the source of order and disorder cannot impose regulations and laws. It is necessary to have an ear that uniquely hears, discernment that uniquely sees, for only then can you take personal responsibility for implementing the way. 13/122/11, 18 Now, the yin replaced the xia, the zhou replaced the yin, the spring and autumn period replaced the zhou. The rites of the three dynasties were not the same. Why should antiquity be followed? 13/122/20 13.7 Great men create and their disciples follow. If you understand from whence law and governance arise, then you can respond to the times and alter. If you do not understand the origin of law and governance, even if you accord with antiquity, you will end up in disorder. The legal edicts of the current age should alter with the times, ritual standards should change with customs. Scholars accord with those who came before, inherit their practices, rely on their records, and hold fast to their teachings thinking that if they oppose them there will be no order. This is like trying to use a square tool to chisel out a round hole. You hope to obtain a proper fit and a fixed starting point, but it is very difficult. Now the Confucians and Maoists revere the three dynasties and Wen and Wu, but they do not put this into practice. This is to affirm in words what they do not practice. They oppose the current age, but they do not reform it. This is to affirm in practice what they oppose. They praise what they affirm but put into practice what they oppose. They thereby expend their days with utmost anxiety yet without contributing anything to governance. They weary their bodies and strain their understanding without giving any aid to the ruler. Nowadays artisans like to paint demons and detest representing dogs and horses. Why? Because demons do not appear in the world, while dogs and horses can be seen daily. Now, to maintain oneself in times of danger and to govern in times of disorder cannot be done without intelligence, but even a fool can praise what came before and revere antiquity. Thus, a sage king does not implement useless laws, a sage king does not heed unverifiable words. 13/122/20, 27 13.8 As for the chi of heaven and earth, nothing is as grand as harmony. Harmony means the blending of yin and yang, the dividing of day and night, and the birth of the myriad things. In the period of spring there is birth, in the period of autumn there is maturation. With birth and maturation, things invariably obtain the quintessence of harmony. Therefore, the way of the sages is lenient yet firm, strict yet kind, pliant yet upright, forceful yet humane. Too much hardness leads to inflexibility, too much softness leads to laxity. Sages properly reside between hardness and softness and thereby obtain the root of the way. If they accumulate only yin, they will sink. If they accumulate only yang, they will fly away. With yin and yang conjoined, they thereby perfect harmony. 13/122/29 13/123/2 Considering the marking cord as a standard, it can be rolled up and tucked away, it can be drawn out and stretched, it can be straightened and followed with the eye. Therefore, sages use their bodies to incarnate it. Now, when lengthened, it is not crooked, when shortened, it is not deficient, when straightened, it is not rigid. Long-lasting and not ephemeral, this is a marking cord. Therefore, kindness pushed too far is feebleness, being feeble, one has no authority. Strictness pushed too far is fierceness, being fierce, one is not harmonious. Loving pushed too far is laxity, being lax, one cannot command. Punishing pushed too far is cruelty, being cruel, one cannot win affection. 13/123/4, 7 In earlier times, Duke Jian of Qi let go the reins of his country and transferred responsibility to his ministers. They took up the authority, they arrogated power to themselves, they acted selfishly, they formed factions, and the public way was not put into practice. As a result, Chen Chang 19 and Chai Zipi 20 fell into difficulties, the house of Lu broke off their sacrifices, and the house of Chen took the country. This is what arises from too much softness and feebleness. Xiang of Chen was firm and harsh and fond of punishments. In his use of punishments, he carried them out without pardons. One of his officers broke about, fearing retribution and terrified of being put to death. He took advantage of the panic caused by a mad dog and killed Xiang. 21 This is what firmness and fierceness bring about. Nowadays, those who do not understand the way, seeing the soft and feeble being usurped, turn to acting firmly and harshly, seeing firmness and harshness being destroyed, turn to acting softly and feebly. This is due to the lack of a basis within and to one's hearing and seeing being dragged along from the outside. Therefore, to the end of one's days, one will have no stable way of acting. This is like singing without knowing the melody, the low notes will be flat and will not be in tune with the other notes, the high notes will be too sharp and will not harmonize. When it came to the melodies of Hanyi, Qinqing, and Xuetan and the songs of Hotong and Wanshen, 22 The music aroused their inclinations and accumulated inside them, welling up and emerging as notes, so that none failed to be in tune with the pitch pipes. And all harmonized with the hearts of others who heard them. How so? Within themselves they had a basis and a ruling principle that let them hit exactly the low and high notes. They received nothing externally, they themselves were the standard. 23 Now, if a blind man is walking down a road, when people say to go left, he goes left, when people say to go right, he goes right. If he meets a gentleman, then he will follow an easy path, if he meets a petty man, he will fall into a ditch. How so? His eyes have nothing with which to connect. Therefore, Wei used both Lu Bai and Zaijiang 24 and lost its lands west of the Yellow River. King Min of Qi 25 used only Now Qi 26 and died at Dongmiao. They did not possess the technique for driving the chariot of state. King Wen used both Lu Wang and Duke Shi of Zhao and became king. King Zhuang of Chu used only Sun Chuao and became hegemon. They possessed the technique for driving the chariot of state. 13/123/7, 1813.9 Singing to stringed instruments and dancing to drums so as make music, turning, bestowing, diminishing, yielding so as to practice the rites, having lavish burials and lengthy mourning so as to send off the dead, these were established by Confucius, but Mozi opposed them. Universal love, honoring the worthy, esteeming ghosts, opposing fatalism, these were established by Mozi, but Yangzi 27 opposed them. Keeping your nature intact, protecting your authenticity, not allowing things to entangle your form, 28 These were established by Yangzi, but Mencius 29 opposed them. In accepting or rejecting something, people differ, for each has a particular understanding in mind. Thus, right and wrong are based on a particular perspective. Gain a particular perspective, and something is not wrong, lose that particular perspective, and the same thing is not right. As for the people of Dangxiu, Taman, Fanzhong, Kongtong, Daxia, Baihu, Qiang, Xiaogu, 30 each have their different rights and wrongs. And their customs are mutually opposed. Ruler and minister, superior and inferior, husband and wife, father and son, each has its related service. What is right for the one is not right for the other, what is wrong for the one is not wrong for the other. It is like an axe, hatchet, hammer, and chisel, each having its own function. 13/123/20, 25 In the time of Yu, he listened to proper order by means of the 5 tones. Suspended by silk cords were bells, drums, chimestans, and bells with clappers, and set up on frames were small drums, all to greet officers from the four quarters. It was proclaimed, if it is someone to teach me the way, strike the drum. If it is someone to discuss with me rightness, strike the bell. If it is someone to announce to me affairs of state, shake the bells with clappers. If it is someone to talk to me of troubles, strike the chimestans. If it is someone with a legal dispute, play the small drums. At this time, he would get up 10 times during a single meal, and he would be interrupted 3 times when washing his hair, all to labor for the people in the world. If one failed to attain this level of goodness and loyalty, then even talent was insufficient. In the time of Qin, they built to great height towers and pavilions, made extensive gardens and enclosures, and built far-reaching imperial roads. They cast bronze figures, sent out troops, and brought in grasses and grains. Taxes, levies, and duties were transported to the treasuries. Young men and grown men were sent west to Lincheo and Daidao, east to Huiji and Fuxi, south to Yuzhang and Guilin, north to Fihu and Yangyuan. On the roads, the dead filled the ditches. At this time, those who loyally remonstrated were called inauspicious, and those who took humaneness and rightness as their way were called mad. When we come down to the time of Emperor Gao, 31, the founder of the Han, he survived in the face of destruction, he continued what had been cut off. He upheld the great rightness of the world, he personally worked and grasped a sword so as to beseech august heaven on behalf of his people. At this time, those in the world who were courageous, brave, valiant, and talented endured sun and rain in the fields and marshes, the vanguard were exposed to arrows and stones, the rearguard fell into ravines and ditches. For every 100 sent out, 1 would survive in the struggle for the balance of the world. With a determined martiality and a rigorous sincerity, they cut short their allotted lifespan to a single day. At this time, those who wore sumptuous clothing and wide sashes and who took the teachings of the Confucians and Maoists as their way were taken as unworthy. This continued until the tyranny and disorder was ended and overcome. He settled the affairs of all within the seas, continued the undertakings of civility and established the merits of martiality. 32. He compiled the land registers of the Son of Heaven, created a ceremonial cap for the house of Liu, unified the Confucians and Maoists of Zhou and Lu, and penetrated the transmitted teachings of the former sages. He displayed the banners of the Son of Heaven, traveled the great roads, established the 9 penance, rang the great bell, struck the drum, played the pool of Xian, 33, and raised the shield and battle axe. At that time, those who established martiality were viewed with suspicion. In the span of a single era, civility and martiality alternated as female and male, at the right time each was used. In the present time, those who practice martiality reject civility. Those who practice civility reject martiality. Supporters of civility and martiality oppose each other, but they do not understand timely utilization. Each sees only a finger pointing at one corner or angle and does not understand the length and greatness of all the 8 points of the horizon circle. Therefore, when one looks to the east, one does not see the western wall, when one looks to the south, one does not see the north. Only if one does not incline toward any side will one comprehend everything. 13/123/27 13/124/13 The means by which a state survives is the potency of the way, the means by which its ruling family perishes is the obstruction of its principles. Yao did not possess even a suburb of 100 families, Shan did not possess even enough territory in which to stick in all, yet they took possession of the world. You did not possess even a group of 10 men, Tang did not possess even a distribution of 7 li, yet they ruled as true kings over the lords of the land. King Wen resided in the environs of Qizhou, and his territory did not exceed 100 li, yet he was established as the Son of Heaven, for he possessed the way of a true king. During the height of Xiaoji and Yin Zhao's rule, where human footsteps trod, where boats and chariots penetrated, no lands failed to become their prefectures and commanderies. Yet they personally died at the hands of other men and became the laughing stock of the world. These are cases of their losing sight of the shape of things. Thus, sages observe transformations and look for their future verification. Potency has times of waxing and waning, winds precede the budding of plants. Thus those who attain the way of the true king, though initially small, invariably became great. While those who lost sight of the shape of things, though initially successful, invariably suffered defeat. Now when Xia was about to perish, grand astrologer Zhonggu first fled to Shang. In 3 years, Ji was already lost. When Yin was about to collapse, grand astrologer Xiangyi first returned home to King Wen. Within a year, the tyrant Zhao was already lost. 34. Thus when sages view the traces of survival and destruction and the borderline between success and defeat, they do not resort to reading animals' cries in the wilderness or divining the auspiciousness of Jia and Zi days. Today, those who are called strong prevail, measuring their territories and calculating their population. Those who are called wealthy benefit, measuring their grain and weighing their gold. This being the case, among rulers of 10,000 chariots, there were none who did not become hegemon or king. Among states of 1,000 chariots there were none who were not destroyed or imperiled. Since the traces of survival and destruction are like this, they are easy to recognize, even a foolish husband or daft wife could assess them. Viscount Xiang of Zhao became preeminent because of the walls of Jiniang, Earl Ji was captured for the territory of the Three Jin, King Min was destroyed for the great state of Qi, Tian Dan 35 had merit because of Jimo. Thus, when it comes to the destruction of a state, even if the state is large, it does not suffice to depend on its size. When it comes to putting the way into effect, even if the state is small, it does not suffice to take it lightly. Looking at it from this perspective, survival lies in obtaining the way, it does not lie in being large. Destruction lies in losing the way, it does not lie in being small. The Ode states, so he turned his gaze west, and here made his dwelling place. 36. This says that the high god left Yin and moved to Zhou. Thus the ruler of a chaotic state strives to enlarge his territory but does not strive for humaneness and rightness, strives to elevate his position but does not strive for the way and its potency. This is to lose that by which one survives and to create that by which one perishes. Thus, when Ji was taken captive at Jiaomen, he was not able to negate what he had put into effect, he only regretted that he had been unable to slay Tang at Xiatai. When Zhao was fettered at Suanji, he did not reverse his errors, he only regretted that he had been unable to chastise King Wen at Qiuli. These two rulers enjoyed the positional advantage of strength and size, but cultivating the way of humaneness and rightness, Tang and Wu sought out their faults and did not give up. What plans did they dare think up? If above you disorder the brightness of the three luminaries and below you lose the hearts of the myriad people, even if you are a Tang or Wu, who would not be capable of usurping you? Now, if you do not look for flaws within yourself but, on the contrary, search for them in others, the world will be without a single Tang or Wu. If you kill a single person, that is something that will have repercussions for generations. Moreover, the reason why Tang and Wu, though occupying a small and weak position, could become king was because they possessed the way. The reason why Ji and Zhao, though occupying a strong and great position, in the end witnessed their usurpation, was because they lacked the way. Now, if you do not practice the means by which one becomes a king and, on the contrary, increase the means by which one is usurped, this is the path of speedy destruction. 13/124/15, 13/125/6 When King Wu vanquished Yin, he wanted to construct a palace on the Wuhang Mountains. The Duke of Zhou exclaimed, "It is not permissible. The Wuhang Mountains are a rugged, blocked, precipitous, and sheer place. If we conduct ourselves so that our moral potency can cover over them, those in the world who offer up tribute and knowledge will turn themselves toward us. If we engage in violent and disorderly conduct, the world will attack us when we are in difficulty. For this reason, in 36 generations there was not a single usurpation. It can be said of the Duke of Zhou that he was able to grasp when enough was enough. 13/125/8, 1031.11 In days of old, the documents of Zhou 37 had a saying that read, sometimes one elevates words and denigrates practicalities, sometimes one denigrates words and elevates practicalities. Elevating words is the norm, denigrating words is expedient. This is the technique for surviving in the face of destruction. But only a sage is capable of understanding expediency. To speak and invariably elicit trust and to anticipate and invariably elicit a match are examples of lofty conduct in the world. When his father stole a sheep, straight body testified against him. 38 When Wei Sheng and his wife were to meet, he died on account of it. 39 Being upright and testifying against one's father or being trustworthy and dying for one's woman. Although this may be upright and trustworthy, who would think it honorable? Now when the three armies feign orders, 40 The trespass is great indeed. But when Duke Mu of Qin raised an army to attack Zhen, he passed through Zhou and headed east. A merchant from Zhen named Xian Gao was heading west to sell his oxen. On the road he encountered the Qin forces between Zhou and Zhen, whereupon he feigned orders from the Viscount of Zhen, fated them with 12 oxen, hosted them, and withdrew, thereby saving the state of Zhen. 41 Thus events have their causes, so that trustworthiness, contrary to expectation, might go too far, and prevarication, contrary to expectation, may be meritorious. What does it mean to abandon ritual yet be greatly meritorious? In the days of old, when King Gong of Chu 42 and Duke Li of Jin 43 battled at Yinling, 44 Lu Qi 45 shot an arrow at King Gong, hit him in the eye, and took him captive. 46 Shen Wan, Yan Yuji, Huang Shuiwei, and Gong Sunbing were in the midst of recapturing their sovereign when, in his fright, King Gong physically lost consciousness. Only when Huang Shuiwei raised his foot to kick him in the gut did King Gong return to consciousness. Angry that Huang Shuiwei had strayed from ritual protocol, King Gong aroused himself and stood up, and the 4 ministers were able to carry him off and leave. 47 In the days of old, Kang Warao 48 married a wife who was beautiful and thus gave her to his elder brother. This is what is called being loyal and loving yet behaving incorrectly. For this reason, when sages assess whether an affair be crooked or straight, they bend or stretch themselves and curl or straighten alongside it. They do not adhere to a constant standard, so sometimes they bend and other times they stretch. When they are weak and yielding like a thin sheaf of grass, they do not take or snatch. When they are resolute, strong, fierce, and bold and their wills are oppressive like grey clouds, they do not brag or boast. They thereby avail themselves of timeliness and respond to alterations. 3/125/12, 22 In the intercourse between ruler and minister, there is the bending of the knee and the humble salutation of the subordinate, employing the rights of mutual respect. But when it comes to being pressed by a calamity, so that one raises a foot to kick one's superior in the gut, no one in the world can repudiate such an action. For this reason, where loyalty is securely present, ritual norms are not sufficient to challenge it. When the filial son serves his father, with pleasing expression and submissive posture he offers him his sash and lays out his shoes. But if the father is drowning, he grabs him by the hair and pulls him out of the water. This is not because he is presuming to be arrogant or haughty but because he means to rescue his father from death. Thus, when a father is drowning, to grab him by the hair and, when a ruler is celebrating, to call him by name, these things derive from the power of circumstance and so cannot be otherwise. This is what establishes the basis for expediency. Thus Confucius said, a person might be suitable as someone with whom to study and yet not suitable as someone with whom to pursue the way. A person might be suitable as someone with whom to pursue the way and yet not suitable as someone with whom to take a stand. A man might be suitable as Someone with whom to take a stand and yet not suitable as someone with whom to exercise expediency. 49. Expediency is something the sages alone perceive. Thus, those who first disobey ritual norms but ultimately accord with them are said to understand expediency. Those who first accord with ritual norms but later oppose them are said to lack an understanding of expediency. For those who do not understand expediency, goodness conversely appears to be ugliness. Thus, ritual is the efflorescence of reality, but people mistakenly take it to be mere ornamentation. So when they are in the midst of being unexpectedly pressed by difficulties, exhausted and agitated, they have nothing to use to cope with them. For this reason, sages use external ornamentation to communicate with the world but inner reality to pursue affairs in a suitable way. They are not bound by the path of a single line of footprints, becoming fixed and rigid so as to fail to transform. For this reason, their unsuccessful affairs are few, but their successful affairs are numerous, their commands and directives fill the world, and no one can deny them. 13/125/24, 13/126/3 13.12 The orangutan knows the past but does not know the future, the male goose knows the future but does not know the past. Such is the distinction between long and short. In the days of old, Chang Hong served as a calendrical specialist to the house of Zhou. With regard to the qi of heaven and earth, the movements of the sun and moon, the alterations of the winds and rain, and the calculations of the calendar, there was nothing he failed to comprehend. Yet he was incapable of self-knowledge and died by dismemberment when torn apart by the chariot. Suchin 50 was a common mendicant, with no more than leather sandals and the open sky for his umbrella, yet he manipulated the rulers of 10,000 chariots and won the admiration of the lords of the land. But he did not avoid the calamity of being split by a chariot. King Yan of Su, 51 with compassion and kindness as his bedding and clothes, personally practiced humaneness and rightness, and those who resided in no fewer than 32 states traveled overland to hold an audience with him. Yet he perished and his state was destroyed, with his sons and grandsons devoid of offspring. 52 Grand Minister Zhong 53 assisted and aided King Gujian of Yu, avenging his grievances and cleansing his shame, capturing Fukei and opening up for cultivation several thousand li of land. Yet he fell on the Shulu sword 54 and died. These all are examples of comprehending the linchpin of order and disorder yet not understanding the basis of keeping one's nature intact. Thus, Chang Hong understood the way of heaven, but he did not understand human affairs. Suchin understood expedient strategies, but he did not understand bad and good fortune. King Yan of Su understood humaneness and rightness, but he did not understand timeliness, and Grand Minister Zhong understood loyalty, but he did not understand strategy. 13/126/5, 12 sages are not like this. They assess the age and determine their actions accordingly, they weigh affairs and devise their strategies accordingly. For this reason, they propagate them throughout the vastness of the world, but they are not isolated, they contain them within the smallness of a Sun and Chang, but they are not obstructed. 13/126/14, 15 13.13 When a ruler causes the world to be desolate and chaotic, rights and rightness are cut off, bonds and ties are dispensed with. The strong take advantage of the weak, attackers force the submission of the vanquished, minister and ruler lack hierarchical distinction, the noble and the humble lack deferential order, armor and helmets become infested with lice and fleas, swallows and sparrows roost in the tents and canopies, so that the soldiers never get any rest. At that point, he may begin to adopt a cautious demeanor and conduct reverent rites, but it will be too late and he will invariably be destroyed with no possibility of being restored. When a ruler causes the world to be secure and peaceful, administration and instruction are harmonious and equitable, the 100 names i.e., the common people are reverent and affable, superiors and subordinates are mutually affectionate. At that point, the ruler might begin to establish an atmosphere of leniency. If so, he will embolden the courageous and strong, and so will be unable to avoid falling subject to the laws of those who have authority. For this reason, sages can be yin, and they can be yang, they can be weak, and they can be strong, in tempo with the times, they are active or still, in accordance with the inner substance of things, they establish merit. When things become active, they know their reversions, when affairs sprout forth, they anticipate their alterations, when things transform, they act in their image, when things move, they respond to them. This is why to the end of their days, they are effective and free of troubles. 13/126/15, 2013.14 Precedents and affairs have some that can be practiced but cannot be discussed, some that can be discussed but cannot be practiced, some that are easy to do but difficult to perfect, some that are difficult to perfect but easy to ruin. What is meant by can be practiced but cannot be discussed is pursuing and abandoning. What is meant by can be discussed but cannot be practiced is lying and cheating. What is easy to do but difficult to perfect is management. What is difficult to perfect but easy to ruin is a reputation. These four tendencies are things that the sages uniquely see and where they focus their minds. Curling up to the shortness of an inch or extending to the length of a foot are things the sages do. Minimizing wrongs and maximizing rights are things the superior man practices. The Duke of Zhou was saddled with the burden of killing a brother, and Duke Huan of Qi had a reputation for competing with other states. Yet the Duke of Zhou relied on rightness to compensate for his shortcomings, and Duke Huan relied on his merit to eradicate evil, so that both became worthies. Now if on account of others' insignificant errors, you conceal their significant goodness, the world will be bereft of sage kings and worthy ministers. Thus, if at the center of the eye there is a blemish, it does not harm one's vision, though it cannot be cauterized by burning. If at the center of the throat there is a defect, it does not harm one's breathing, though it cannot be cut away. The mounds and hillocks along the riverbank are too numerous to be counted, but the riverbank is still considered level. When water surges to give rise to waves, the high and the low approach each other and can differ in height by a sun or a chang, yet we consider the water to be level. In days of old, Kazai 55 commanded an army on behalf of Liu. 3 times in battle he was not victorious and lost thousands of li in territory. If Kazai had persisted in his plans and had not reversed course, had planted his feet without budging, he might have had his throat cut at Chenzhong or ended his days as the captive commander of a defeated army. But Kazai was not embarrassed by his defeat and did not die in shame and without merit. Instead, during the interstate meeting at K, he took a sword 3 feet long and pointed it at the midriff of Duke Huan of Qi. Thus the effects of 3 defeats in battle were reversed in the course of a morning. His courage was heralded throughout the world, and his accomplishments were established in the state of Liu. 56 Guanzhong assisted Prince Ju, 57 but with no good outcome. It cannot be said that he was wise. He escaped and hastily fled, failing to die during his lord's troubles. It cannot be said that he was brave. 58 When you are bound and tied in fetters and monocles and cannot avoid being shamed, it cannot be said that you are lucky. If you correspond to these 3 kinds of conduct, the commonly clad, i.e., the people will not offer their friendship, and the ruler of men will be bereft of true ministers. Yet Guanzhong avoided the inside of prisons, established the government of the state of Qi, 9 times united the lords of the land, and unified and rectified the world. If Guanzhong had sought death by sacrificing his life and had not been willing to reverse his plans, what hegemonic merit would there have been in this? 13/126/22, 13/127/6 Now when the ruler of men assesses his ministers, if he does not calculate their significant achievements or evaluate their overall conduct but instead seeks out their petty merits, he will lose the services of worthies in untold numbers. Thus, when someone possesses generous amounts of moral potency, none notes their trifling matters, and when someone possesses a great reputation, none faults their small excuses. A puddle in a cow's hoof print 59 cannot suffice to give birth to a sturgeon. A bee's honeycomb cannot hold a goose egg. 60. A small form is not sufficient to embrace a large body. 13/127/8, 1013.15 Now, it is the essential quality of humankind to possess shortcomings. Truly, if in general they are correct, even if they commit minor transgressions, it will not be sufficient to be considered burdensome. If in general they are incorrect, even if they have some rustic accomplishments, it would not be enough to qualify them for a great promotion. Yan Zhuoja 61 was a great bandit of Mount Liangfu, but he became a loyal minister to the state of Qi. Duan Ganmu 62 was a swindler in the state of Jin, but he became a teacher to the Duke of Wen. Menmao 63 married his sister-in-law and had 5 sons by her. Yet when he became minister in Wei, he quelled its danger and relieved its suffering. Jingyan 64 was licentious and drunken, unloosing hairpins and forcing himself on his wives, yet he awed the lords of the land into submission. These 4 men all possessed weaknesses, yet their meritorious reputation was not eradicated, for their general conduct was efficacious. 65 Gai 66 and Chen Zongzi 67 established their purity with their unyielding conduct. They would not enter the court of a corrupt ruler, they would not eat food produced during an unrighteous age. Subsequently they starved to death and died. Were they not able to survive in the face of danger or continue their lineages in the face of being cut off? As their trivial acts of purity expanded, the significance of their general conduct contracted. Those who are small-minded and cautious do not enjoy great accomplishments. Those who calculate their actions do not find acceptance by the masses. A large-bodied person is long in the joints. A person with a long stride can go high and far. From antiquity to the present, even among the 5 emperors and 3 kings, there were none who perfected their conduct. Thus the Changes says, should minor transgressions prosper, beneficial and lucky. 68 This means that there is not a single person who does not err, but one hopes the errors will not be great. 13/127/10, 21 Yao, Shun, Tang, and Wu were eminent rulers of their age. Duke Huan of Qi and Duke Wen of Jin were the martial and brave of the 5 hegemons. 69 Yet Yao had a reputation for being unloving, Shun slandered his humble father, Tang and Wu were implicated in liberating murderers, and the 5 hegemons 70 produced schemes that led to tyranny and disorder. 71 For this reason, the superior man does not place the entire blame for something on a single person. If he is square and correct, the superior man does not make mincemeat of him. If he is incorruptible and upright, the superior man does not slice him to death. If he is expansive and penetrating, the superior man does not slander him. If he is civil or martial, the superior man does not upbraid him. When he makes demands on others, he does so in accordance with their strength. When he reforms himself, he does so in accordance with the way's potency. If you make demands on others in accordance with their strength, it is easy to get what you want. If you cultivate yourself by relying on the way's potency, it is difficult to do. If it is difficult to do, then carrying it out will be lofty. If it is easy to get what you want, then seeking it will suffice. Now, even the jade half-disc of the Xiahe clan 72 cannot be without some flaw on examination, the moonglow pearl cannot be without some imperfection on classification. Yet they are among the great treasures of the world. Why? Their slight imperfections do not suffice to obstruct their great beauty. Now if you set your mind on others' shortcomings and forget others' strengths yet seek to obtain worthies throughout the empire, it will be difficult indeed. 13/127/22, 27 13.16 Now regarding Bailey, she's cooking the calf, Yi Yin's shouldering the tripod, the Grand Duke's drumming on his sword, and Ning Qi singing a song in the Shang mode. The beauty of these things was inherent in the acts themselves. But the masses saw only their humble and lowly position and treated them with rudeness. They did not recognize the larger meaning of their actions and considered them to be worthless. But when these men rose to the rank of son of heaven or one of the three dukes or became a lord of the land or worthy minister, only then did the masses begin to believe that such people differed from the average person. Now take a cook who emerges from amid the tripods and stands, a glutton who comes out of the butcher's or wine seller's shop, a cowherd who rises from below a cow's horn, a felon liberated from bonds and fetters, clean him up with a hot bath, warm him by a fire, and set him up at the pinnacle of the present dynasty, or rely on him to take the position of one of the three dukes. At home he will not feel shame before the great families of state, while abroad he will not be abashed before the lords of the land. His tally of office and his positional power will be inwardly in conformity. Thus, as for knowing that someone is worthy before his achievements have been manifested, only Yao Nu Shun. But to know someone is worthy after his achievements have been accomplished and his tasks brought to success, all the people in the marketplace then Nu Shun. Now if on account of this, i.e., Yao's extraordinary ability to recognize merit, you abandon measures and methods and seek out good men in the morning market or among weeds and thickets, you would surely miss many competent people. Why is this so? You may imitate them in searching, but you will not know the means by which they chose people. 13/128/1, 713.17 Now what confuse and bewilder people of the present age are the comparative categories of things. What bedazzle and baffle the masses are things that are deceptively alike in a doubtful and suspicious way. Thus, fierceness is sometimes categorized as knowledge, but it is fundamentally not knowledge. Foolishness is sometimes categorized as humaneness, but it is fundamentally not humaneness. Stupidity is sometimes categorized as courage, but it is fundamentally not courage. If we could make the comparative differences among people as evident as the comparison between jade and stone or the comparison between beauty and ugliness, then assessing people would be easy. Now what confuses people is like machino being taken for ligusticum, or niddy fructus being taken for deer parsley. 73 They all look like one another. Thus, a swordsmith might wonder whether a sword resembles the famous sword moi, but only a master like Ou the smelter can name its type. A jade worker might be in the dark about whether a jade resembles Bilu azure jade, but only a master like Chi Dun 74 will not lose sight of its essential qualities. A benighted lord might be confused by seductive ministers who say that a petty man resembles a superior man, but only a sage can see what is obscured, thereby knowing what is evident. Thus, if a snake raises its head a foot, its length can be known; if an elephant reveals its tusk, its size can be assessed. If Zhu Yongzi of Shui 75 saw a piece of a sword the size of a fingernail, 76 he could judge the sharpness of the sword. If the water of the Zhe and Shen rivers were combined, UER 77 and Yiya would taste one mouthful, and their respective flavors lit, bitter and sweet would be recognized. Thus when sages assess worthiness, they observe a single action and from it distinguish worthiness or worthlessness. Confucius refused the fief of Granary Hill, and in the end he would not steal emolument. 78 Suyu yielded the empire, and in the end he did not value land or title. Thus, those who have never been burned even so do not dare to grasp fire because they recognize that it burns. Those who have never been injured even so do not dare grasp a blade because they recognize that it injures. Looking at the issue from this perspective, the observer can assess what has yet to unfold, and by watching trifling things, it will suffice to know significant entities. Thus this is the way of assessing others: if they are noble, observe what they acclaim; if they are wealthy, observe what they bestow; if they are exhausted, observe what they refuse to accept; if they are lowly, observe what they refuse to do; if they are impoverished, observe what they refuse to take. Watch them when pressed by hardship to know their courage, arouse them with happiness and joy to observe their steadfastness, entice them with goods and property to assess their humaneness, startle them with fear and loathing to know their self-restraint. Then the feelings of others will be fully apparent to you. 13/128/9, 21 13.18 In antiquity, those who excelled at rewarding rewarded the few, and the many were encouraged. those who excelled at punishing punished sparingly. And licentiousness was stopped, those who excelled at giving used restraint and put potency into practice, those who excelled at taking brought in the many and prevented resentment. When Viscount Xiang of Wei was surrounded in Jiniang, he broke the siege and rewarded the 5 men who were meritorious, and Gao He 79 was the first to be rewarded. Those who flanked him to the right and left exclaimed, as for the hardships at Jiniang, Gao did not possess any great merit, yet today he is the first to be rewarded. What? Viscount Xiang of Wei responded, during the siege of Jiniang, our altars to the soil and grain were endangered, and our state and families were imperiled. Among our numerous officials, there was not one who did not harbor a proud and arrogant heart, but only he did not stray from the ritual pertaining to ruler and minister. Thus through the rewarding of this one man, those who served as ministers in the world, without exception to the end of their lives, showed loyalty to their ruler. This is an example of rewarding the few to encourage the many. 80 When King Wei of Qi set up the Grand Ding vessel at the center of his court, he upbraided the commander of Huainan, saying, "Your acclaim daily reaches my ears. Yet having examined your actions, I find that your cultivated fields are overgrown with weeds, your granaries are empty, and your prisons are full. You rely on treachery to serve me." Then the king had him boiled alive. In the state of Qi for 32 years thereafter, none who traveled the roads and byways picked up any items left on the road. This is an example of punishing sparingly so that treachery is stopped. Duke Mu of Qin was traveling abroad when his chariot broke down, and his right-hand assistant lost control of the horses. Some local rustics caught them. Duke Mu of Qin followed them in pursuit to the southern slope of Mount Ji. There he observed that the local rustics had just cooked the horses and were eating them. Duke Mu of Qin exclaimed, "If you eat the meat of a fine steed but do not follow it with a drink of wine, you will harm yourselves. I fear this harm will befall you." Then he passed out drinks and went away. That same year, Duke Mu of Qin waged a war with Duke Hui of Jin at Han Yuan. The Jin forces surrounded Duke Mu's chariot. Just as Liang Yuma grabbed the reins of the 2 outside horses of the 4 abreast team and was about to take Duke Mu captive, the 300 or so men who had dined on the meat of Duke Mu's horse, disregarding death, fought to the bitter end below Duke Mu's chariot. Subsequently they defeated Jin and, contrary to expectation, captured Duke Hui and returned home. This is an example of using moderation to put potency into practice. 81 Duke Huan of Qi was hoping to launch a punitive expedition. His armor and weapons being insufficient, he directed those who had committed serious crimes to contribute armor of rhinoceros hide and a glaive. Those who had committed light offenses were fined gold in accordance with the severity of their crime. Those who brought suit against someone and did not win had to contribute 1 quiver of arrows. 82 The common people all were pleased by this. So they straightened plant stems to make arrows and smelted metal to make knives, in order to attack the unjust and punish those who had lacked the way. Thereupon Duke Huan became hegemon of the world. 83 This is an example of bringing in the many and so preventing resentment. Thus sages accord with what the people like and thereby encourage them to do good, accord with what the people hate and therefore put a stop to wantonness. When they reward a single person, the whole world praises them, when they punish a single person, the whole world fears them. Thus, the best rewards are not wasteful, the best punishments are not excessive. When Confucius punished Vice-Director Mao, 84 evil in the state of Lu was obstructed, 85 when Zi Chan punished Deng Shi, 86 wantonness in the state of Zhen was stopped. 87 They used what was near to assess what was distant, they used what was small to know what was great. Thus sages preserve frugality and govern broadly. This is what is meant. 13/128/23 13/129/11 13.19 In the world, nothing is easier than doing good, and nothing is harder than doing evil. What is meant by doing good is to be quiescent and non-active, what is meant by doing evil is to be impulsive and harbor many desires. If you accord with your feelings and eschew excess, there will be nothing to entice and mislead you. If you follow your nature and preserve your authenticity, there will be no alteration to yourself. Thus I say, to do good is easy. To clamber over city walls, to sneak around precipices and barriers, to feign tallies of authority, to rob offices of their gold, or to commit regicide and usurpation and presume to carry out punishments in the ruler's name, such actions are not in the nature of human beings. Thus I say, to do evil is difficult. Now the reason why people commit crimes that bring imprisonment or sink into the calamities of mutilating punishments is that their lusts and desires are not satiated and they do not comply with limits and measures. How do I know that this is so? The laws of the district magistrates across the world state, those who open graves will be executed, those who steal will be punished. These are the measures employed to uphold order. Now, laws and ordinances entrap wickedness and depravity, and restraints and fetters follow in the footsteps of crime. Neither a foolish husband nor a daft wife fails to know that if they commit evil there is no escape, and if they defy the prohibitions they will not obtain a pardon. Yet no account children fail to restrain their desires and so commit crimes that warrant the death penalty or suffer the disgrace of undergoing judicial mutilation. Moreover, after the beginning of autumn, 88 the troops of the commandant of justice ceaselessly bring criminals to the town gates, so that the blood of those put to death in the market flows copiously into the streets. Why so? They are led astray by the pursuit of wealth and advantage so that they become blind to the calamity of the death sentence. Now suppose that foot soldiers are lined up in military formation, with opposing armies facing each other, and the commanders gives the order, saying, those who behead the enemy will be rewarded with noble rank, while those who duck or flinch will be beheaded. The front line of soldiers will not be able, i.e., will be afraid to advance and pursue the merit of beheading the enemy, while the rear ranks unable to engage the enemy will suffer the punishment of being beheaded. This is to avoid the fear of death and pursue the inevitability of death. Thus the reversions of benefit and harm, the meeting of good and bad fortune, must be investigated. 13/129/13, 23 13.20 With regard to actions, there are some that you want to carry out, but circumstances warrant that you abandon them, there are some that you want to avoid, but circumstances warrant that you pursue them. There was a man of Chu who boarded a boat and encountered a typhoon. The waves were upon him, and in his fright he threw himself into the water. It is not that he did not covet life and fear death, but that sometimes in fearing death, you commit the contradiction of being forgetful of your life. Thus human lusts and desires are also like this. Among the people of Qi was someone who stole gold. Just when the market was most crowded, he arrived, grabbed it, and fled. When held by force and asked, "Why did you steal gold from the market?" he responded, "I did not see anyone, I only saw gold." When the mind is preoccupied with desires, it forgets what it does. For this reason, sages scrutinize the alterations of movement and rest, accord with the due measures of receiving and giving, order the feelings of liking and loathing, and harmonize with the occasions of happiness and anger. When the distinctions of movement and rest are attained, calamities will not be encountered. When receiving and giving are in accord, crimes will not accumulate. When liking and loathing are ordered, anxiety will not come near. When happiness and anger are in proper occasion, resentment will not encroach. Thus, those who have achieved the way are not indifferent to obtaining things but are not ravenous for wealth. What they have, they do not abandon, but what they do not have, they do not seek. They are constantly full but not overflowing, they persevere in emptiness but are easily satisfied. 13/129/25 13/130/4 Now the rain that drips from the eaves is sufficient to fill to overflowing a Hu vessel, but the waters of the Yangtze and Yellow rivers cannot fill a leaking Ji cup. 89 Thus the human heart is like this. If you make yourself conform to the techniques of the way in measurement and limitation, food will fill the emptiness, clothes will block the cold, and it will suffice to care for the body of one 7 feet tall. 90. But if you lack the techniques of the way in measurement and limitation and try to practice restraint and moderation on your own, the positional advantage of 10,000 chariots will not suffice to make you honored, and all the wealth in the world will not suffice to make you happy. 13/130/6, 813.21 Sun Quan thrice declined the post of Prime Minister but was free of a worried expression, for rank and emolument could not entangle him. Ci Fei of Jing encountered two scaly dragons that wrapped around his boat, but his mind was not moved, for strange creatures could not startle him. 91 When the minds of sages are regulated and their wills are at ease, their essence and spirit are preserved within. 92 So that things are not sufficient to mislead them. 13/130/8, 10 If a drunkard endeavors to enter the city gates, he will consider it to be like the 7-foot door to the women's quarters. If he is crossing the Yangtze or the Huai River, he will consider it to be a ditch no wider than a Sun or a Chang. The wine has muddled his spirit. When a nervous person sees a standing gnomon at night, he will take it to be a ghost. When he sees an oddly shaped rock, he will take it to be a tiger. Fear has seized his chi. How much truer is this for the strange creatures of the world? When male and female join in intercourse and yin and yang cleave to each other, then feathered creatures produce chicks and fledglings, and furry creatures produce foals and calves. The soft parts become skin and flesh, the hard parts become teeth and bones. People do not find this strange. Likewise, when water gives birth to water bugs and clams, or mountains give birth to gold and jade, people do not find it strange. Likewise, when an old locust tree bursts into flame or dried blood becomes phosphorescent, people do not find it strange. But when mountains give off xiaoyang, water gives birth to wangxiang, wood gives birth to bifang, and wells give birth to finyang, people find it strange. 93 Since they hear and observe them infrequently, their knowledge of these things is superficial. The strange things of the world are matters about which sages have a unique vision. The reversions of benefit and harm are matters about which the knowledgeable have a unique understanding and comprehension. 94 13/130/12, 17 But identifying and differentiating the suspicious and the doubtful are what confuse and befuddle the common people of our age. Because sages see things that cannot be generally made known within the four seas, and hear things that cannot be made clear to the masses of people, they therefore make use of vulgar beliefs in ghosts and spirits and inauspicious and auspicious omens to establish prohibitions for them. And they generalize shapes and expand categories to alter appearances. 95 For them. How do we know this is so? The proverbs of the common people of our age say, in the great sacrifice to the Most High Ones, a pig may serve as the supreme sacrificial animal, or, when interring a dead person, it is not necessary to place his fur garments in the tomb, or, when two people are engaging in swordplay. The grand ancestor will bump them on the elbow, or, whoever lies down with his head pillowed on a doorframe, the ghosts and spirits will step on his head. But none of these are written in the laws and ordinances or handed down among the oral teachings of the sages. Now that in the great sacrifice to the Most High Ones, the pig is considered the supreme sacrificial animal is not because it is superior to wild animals such as deer or that those having spirit illumination uniquely savor it. So what about it? It is simply because householders generally raise pigs and so they are easily obtained, therefore they are really honored because of their convenience. That when burying a dead person his fur garments are not entombed with him is not because the fur garments are better than silk or cotton cloth at warming the body. Rather, it is because the world considers fur to be something that is difficult to obtain and high-priced, and it can be passed on to the next generation. Whereas it is of no advantage to the deceased, it can be used to care for the living. Thus, in accordance with its value, its use as grave goods is avoided. The reason it is said that when two people are engaging in swordplay, the grand ancestor will bump them on the elbow is that when engaging in swordplay, the participants inevitably must have accidents, and if they accidentally injure each other, the rancor necessarily will be great. The enmity from a bloodless match becomes angry combat, and what is a small matter in itself escalates into something involving mutilating punishment. This is because the foolish do not know to restrain themselves, so the sages rely on the grand ancestor to constrain their minds. 96 Now it is said that if anyone lies down with his head pillowed on a doorframe, the ghosts and spirits will leave footprints on his head. If ghosts and spirits can mysteriously be transformed, they will not rely on doorways and windows to come and go. If in accordance with their ethereal quality they come and go, then likewise they cannot tread on things. Now the doorway and windows are things that windy chi passes through, and windy chi is the coarse and bulky stuff of yin and yang. Those who encounter it necessarily fall ill. Therefore we rely on the ghosts and spirits to warn and caution them. Now all things of this kind are not of the sort that can successfully be written down in annals and documents of bamboo or silk and kept in official archives, therefore we use blessings and portents to make them clear. When simpletons do not know enough to realize their own transgressions, we rely on the terrors of ghosts and spirits to teach them a lesson. This is something that arose in the far distant past. If the gullible really think that there are blessings and portents, and the fearless think that there are not, only one who has the way can figure out what they are thinking. 13/130/19, 13/131/4 That the present age sacrifices to the well and the stove, the gate and the door, the basket and the broom and the mortar and pestle, is not because these spirits are able to enjoy these sacrifices but because people presume on and rely on their potency. So that hardship and suffering will not visit them personally. For this reason, when people in season observe the potency of these spirits, they do not afterward forget their efficacy. The clouds touch its stones and disperse, spread over every inch of the land and gather, and in the space of one morning bring rain to the whole world. This happens only on Mount Tai. 97 They flow ceaselessly, though the world reddens with drought for 3 years, and moisten an area extending 100 li, soaking the grass and trees with water. Only the Yangtze and the Huai rivers, this is why the Son of Heaven sacrifices to them in accordance with their rank. Thus, if there is a horse that has saved someone from danger, when it dies people bury it with its carapace for a shroud. If there is an ox that has been virtuous toward a person, when it dies people bury it with the passenger box of a large carriage for its burial mat. If when an ox or horse is meritorious, it cannot be forgotten, how much more so is this the case with people. This is the reason why sages emphasize humaneness and embrace kindness. Thus Yan Di 98 invented fire. When he died, he became the god of the kitchen. You used his strength to the fullest extent on behalf of the world. When he died, he became the god of the soil. Lord Millet invented sowing and reaping. When he died, he became the god of the grain. Yi the archer eradicated harm from the world. When he died, he became the god of the ancestral shrine. This is why ghosts and spirits were set up to receive sacrifices. 13/131/6, 1313.22 There was a man in northern Chu who became a vigilante. His sons implored him to give it up, but he would not listen. Some bandits in the district undertook a massive search to determine his whereabouts. Eventually he was discovered, surprised, at night he fled. Pursuing him, the bandits caught up to him on the road. Those on whose behalf he had striven 99 all fought for him. He got out of it unscathed and returned home. He said to his sons, "You repeatedly tried to stop me from acting as a vigilante. Now there was trouble, and in the end I relied on everyone 100 and got away. Your remonstrances were of no use." He knew how to save himself when there was trouble, but he did not know how to avoid trouble altogether. If you assess affairs in this way, will not the outcome be in doubt? A man from Song was about to marry off his daughter. He said to his child, "This marriage may not turn out successfully. If it looks like you will be sent away, you had better have some savings of your own. If you have something saved up and are rich, it will be easy to marry again later." The child listened to her father's scheme and stole some money and hid it away. When her lord and master realized she was a thief, he expelled her from the house. Her father did not repudiate her but, on the contrary, reaped the benefits of his scheme. He knew that if a bride were expelled she should have saved up money, but he did not know about saving up money and therefore being expelled. If you assess matters in this way, will not the outcome be a surprise? 13/131/15, 22 Now suppose someone were looking for something to haul freight and sought out a single cart to do the job. He reasoned that if a single ox exerted all its strength, the axle might break, so he added another cart shaft to make it more secure. He did not know that it is the pressure of the cart shaft itself that makes the axle break. The king of Chu wore a jade circlet at his waist. He went hunting rabbits, and as a result of his movement, the jade circlet broke. So next time he wore 2 jade circlets at his waist, in order to be prepared. But the 2 jade circlets banged together, and so their destruction was hastened. The government of a chaotic state much resembles these examples. 13/131/24, 28 Now, the eyes of the owl are large, but its vision does not compare with that of the rat, the feet of the millipede are numerous, but its speed does not compare with that of a snake. With things, it is certainly true that there are instances in which being large does not compare with being small, or being numerous does not compare with being few. When it comes to the strength within weakness and the weakness within strength, the danger within safety and the survival within destruction, if not for a sage, who could see it? Greatness or smallness, honor or disgrace, alone do not suffice for an assessment to be made. Only the way that resides in each is to be valued. How can I clarify this point? When the Son of Heaven takes up residence in his suburban pavilion, the 9 ministers hasten to him, and the grandees follow along, those who are seated prostrate themselves, and those who are leaning against the walls set themselves in order. Meanwhile, to prepare for a great audience in the Mingtang, the Son of Heaven hangs up his hat, takes off his sword, undoes his sash, and retires. It is not that the suburban pavilion is large or that the audience hall is narrow and cramped, but that the most highly honored reside there. Now the nobility of the way of heaven does not depend on whatever the Son of Heaven holds in esteem. Wherever it resides, the masses welcome it. When hibernating insects emerge and jays nest, they all turn toward the Supreme One. Perfect harmony lies precisely in this and nothing else. When the emperor sincerely embraces the way and cleaves to perfect harmony, then even the birds and beasts, grasses and trees, do not fail to come under his beneficent influence. Is this not even more true for the people themselves? 13/131/30, 13/132/6